If you ever hear screaming from the cottonwood trees at dusk, don't look up, it means they've noticed you. When I was a kid, my granddad used to warn us about the trees on the edge of his land, the ancient cottonwoods that leaned over the backfields like crooked old men. They were gnarled things, twisted by wind and time, standing too close together, as if huddled in fear or whispering secrets we weren't meant to know. He told us never to go past the fence line after sunset. They scream when they're hungry, he said once, drunk on whiskey and moonlight. And if you hear them, you've already made a mistake. Don't look up. Don't run. Just lie flat on the ground and pray. We all thought it was just his way of scaring us into staying close. But the fear in his eyes when he told those stories, eyes that had seen war, fire, and death, was different. When he died, we inherited the land. My older brother Kyle wanted to sell the property, but I felt drawn to it. Something about those trees had always made me uneasy, but curious. I moved into the house last spring. That first night, I could hear something through the open windows, soft whistling, like wind caught in old wood. I assumed it was the breeze through the branches. But it wasn't wind. The second week, my dog Bear went missing. I found his leash at the fence line, taut and frayed like it had been gnawed or shredded. The grass around it was flattened. I yelled his name into the trees, but no sound came back, not even birdsong. Just that high, eerie whistle. That night, I bolted the windows and locked the doors, and still I couldn't sleep. At 2:44 a.m., I heard the screaming. It started low, like a faraway wail from someone lost and hopeless, then rose to a shrill, warping shriek that stretched impossibly long, as if lungs didn't matter. I tried to convince myself it was a fox or an owl. But no animal makes a sound like it's being torn in two and loving it. The next morning, I found bare footprints around the house. Not human. Toes too long. No arches. And they stopped at the base of one of the cottonwoods. As if whoever, or whatever, left them had just melted into the bark. By midsummer, the trees had started changing. Not just in color. The bark grew darker, the knots more pronounced, like faces trying to press through from underneath. Some nights I thought I saw them shift, like they were leaning closer to the house than they had the night before. The screaming became more frequent. Always at dusk. Always behind me. Then Kyle came to visit. I warned him about the trees. He laughed it off, called me paranoid, and went out for a walk around the back field. He didn't come back. I found one of his shoes near the trees the next morning, soaked in something black that smelled like rust and rot. And overhead, swaying with the wind, were dozens of cottonwood seed pods. But they looked different. Thicker. Vein-lined. And they pulsed, faintly, as if something inside was breathing. I started boarding up the house. The local sheriff won't come past the gate. I told him what I saw, and he went pale. Said his cousin disappeared out here years ago, and they found his coat high up in one of the trees, 40 feet off the ground, perfectly folded on a branch that shouldn't have been able to hold it. Last week, I saw something during the screaming. Just a shape at first. Up in the branches. Not human. Not an animal. It hung like a puppet with cut strings, head tilted, fingers impossibly long, ribs exposed like a cage holding something inside that was trying to get out. It didn't move. Just watched. And then it whispered my name. I haven't slept since. Rules to survive the cottonwood trees. 1. If you hear screaming at dusk, drop to the ground immediately and cover your ears. Do not look up. 2. Never answer if something in the trees calls your name. It means they've chosen you. 3. Do not bring metal into the forest, it draws them closer. 4. If you find cottonwood seeds that are warm to the touch, burn them. They carry something that grows. 5. If you dream of branches wrapping around your throat, don't wake up. The waking world is worse. 6. Never let the screaming go on for more than 7 nights. Leave, no matter the cost. By the 8th, they come for you. I've packed my bags. I'll be leaving tonight. But the trees are creaking more than usual, and the shadows in the yard are longer than they should be. If I don't make it out, and you find this letter, don't look up. Just run. They don't like when we look. They don't like when we know. And worst of all, they remember. They remember every step you took, every breath you stole under their sky, and every thought you dared to form while trespassing through the hush. That name you whispered, even once, has become a flag they follow. They don't march in droves or rush you in the night. No, they watch, quiet and still, like stitched shadows waiting for your back to turn. The hush doesn't end when you leave the field. It follows, like damp breath behind your rear, like wet soil in your footprints. And that night, when I made it back to the highway, When I vomited out that thick, pale mud onto the gravel shoulder, I thought I'd escaped. I thought I could breathe again. But the silence didn't stop ringing in my ears. It was the kind of silence you feel, like pressure in your skull, like something coiled behind your teeth, waiting for your tongue to slip. My phone wouldn't work. Not in the normal no-signal way, it would turn on, but the clock spun backward. Messages I'd never typed blinked across the screen, all lowercase, as if someone else was narrating my thoughts as they were forming. "Don't let them see your eyes," it said once. Then it flashed off and wouldn't come on again. I drove until the sun came up, or at least I thought it did. The light never warmed. The sky turned that bluish-gray shade you see right before storms, and it just stayed there. Hours passed, but the sun never moved. I began to notice other things too. Animals by the road would stop mid-motion, frozen like wax statues. Their eyes followed me, but nothing else did. I saw a deer with moss growing from its antlers and roots coiled into the cracks in its fur. It didn't blink. It just watched. 3 towns over, I thought I'd be safe. I crashed at a stranger's motel, not one of those haunted, flickering light kind. Just a bland, cold room with a TV bolted to the wall and a Gideon Bible stuffed between the bed and nightstand. When I opened it, pages had been ripped out and replaced with old photographs. Photos of the hush field. And me. From behind. From above. Some were close enough to show my face twisted in confusion, 1 foot raised in a step I hadn't taken yet. I don't remember falling asleep, but when I woke up, there was soil under my fingernails. Wet, black soil. And something deeper. It wasn't pain, it was awareness. Something else was awake in me. Like I was only ever the mask. I looked in the mirror, I shouldn't have, and I could see a shimmer in the shape of my pupils, like a reflection behind the reflection. It blinked, just a fraction off sync. I packed my bag, left cash on the bed, and walked out. But the receptionist, who hadn't been there when I checked in, stopped me. "You stepped through the hush," she said, voice calm but dry like paper scraping stone. "You left your name behind. And they picked it up." I didn't ask what that meant. I ran. But even running felt wrong. My own shadow moved too slowly, and when I turned sharply into an alley, I saw myself emerge from the opposite side. Me, not a twin, not a double. But me. With the same bloodshot eyes and tear-streaked face, only older. Worn. Like he'd been running longer than I had. He looked at me and shook his head, mouthing words I could almost hear. "Too late now. The hush has spread. It's in the cracks of the pavement, in the static between radio channels. People glance over their shoulders more now. They say they feel watched, not always, just in the seconds after laughter dies. They say they hear their names called out in the voice of someone who hasn't spoken to them in years. They say mirrors feel wrong, clocks glitch, and shadows seem to pulse when the room gets too quiet. As for me, I stopped using my name. Burned every ID. Scorched the photos. When strangers ask, I just shrug. Because if they ever speak it out loud, even just once, it'll know where to find me again. And worst of all? It'll remember me better than I remember myself. The wind over the graveled highway had stopped whispering hours ago. The silence now felt personal, like the landscape was holding its breath just to hear me think. I walked faster, hugging the cracked shoulder of the road. I'd lost track of how far I was from town, if it even still existed. I tried to recall the names of the people I grew up with, tried to hold their faces in my mind, but every time I focused, they flickered and fell apart like static on an old screen. That thing, that remembrance, was replacing them. It didn't erase memories the way trauma does, suddenly and with gaps. It rewrote them. Slowly, carefully, with surgical precision. I realized this when I looked at my phone and saw texts I didn't remember sending, photos of places I'd never visited, moments I hadn't lived. In one picture, I was smiling in front of a red barn with a woman I didn't know. She looked familiar in that too familiar way, like a dream you didn't realize you were still having. My heart pounded. I had never owned that shirt. I had never smiled like that. And then came the worst part. It answered. My phone buzzed, no number, no name. Just a message. Glad you remember now. The signal dropped immediately after. It was reshaping me. I ducked into a shallow culvert beneath the road, trying to block out the moonlight. My reflection shimmered in the puddle below, but it didn't move right. My eyes blinked too slow. My jaw clenched even when my mind screamed at it to relax. And behind me, in the faint reflection of the ditch water, I saw something. Watching. Not standing. Not crawling. Floating. Its shape was my outline, but smeared, like charcoal drawn and smudged into smoke. There were too many teeth and none at all. A rift in reality where I had once stood, staring out through stolen memory. I shut my eyes. And still saw it. Because that's what it does. It doesn't need your eyes. It just needs your thoughts. That's its entry point. You think about it. You give it shape. And then, it shapes you back. I don't know how long I sat there. The moon passed behind clouds. The air grew heavier, like time itself was thickening. A sound came, like dragging paper over skin, and when I opened my eyes again, the sky was wrong. There were two moons. Both bleeding light. My phone buzzed again. No message this time. Just a ringtone I'd never set, a recording of my own voice whispering, "You don't belong in there anymore." I dropped the phone. It cracked open, and instead of circuits, the inside was packed with tiny folded photographs, hundreds of them. Each one was of me. Different ages, different lives, different worlds. In one I was in a casket, smiling. In another I stood behind a news anchor, my eyes hollow and teeth sharp, unnoticed by the camera. In a third, I was in this exact culvert, staring at the exact same puddle. But something else looked back. Not me. Something wearing my skin. I tried to tear them up. Burn them. But they didn't burn. They bled. And in that moment, I realized, I was no longer trying to escape it. I was it. It had overwritten enough of me that it could now take shape through my thoughts. It was me thinking about it that finished the job. A creature made of memory and mimicry, fed by fear and recognition. And I had recognized it. The final transformation was slow. My hands went first, fingers elongating, bones rearranging. My skin remembered shapes it had never worn. The memories came next. I remembered walking under stars that didn't belong to this planet. I remembered names spoken in dead languages. I remembered pulling people into shadows just to see if they screamed the same way I once had. And I smiled. Because now, I understood. It doesn't take victims. It recruits archivists. It collects the echoes of fear from every mind it touches. It plants stories. It spreads through stories. Through minds. Through you. So, here's the last thing I'll ever write. If you read this far, you've already made it easier for it to find your shape. If you picture the thing, even for a second, it remembers you now. You gave it form. And it will give you one back. Hope you like what you become.